Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Ina, thank you so much for being part of the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, what's so interesting is I've been in the nonprofit space for a long time, currently not in it, but I started much later on in life than you did. You started at 16 years old, which is quite incredible. And your Dream Equal nonprofit has now gone all over 37 different cities, and you can talk about that in a moment. So talk to me and talk to us. What was your inspiration as a young minority social entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, it all kind of started off with personal experiences growing up. I was in a lot of activities where there was just more boys than there were girls. I was in a lot more activities where it was harder to be a girl in those activities. Like I was in debate and I was in a lot of science things, and I found myself a lot of the times being one of the only girls that was succeeding in those activities because those environments made it so hard for girls to even want to join. And I was in those activities for so long, and it never really hit me why I felt uncomfortable in it until I went to high school and I started doing so well in debate that it bothered the other boys that were in debate with me. And I didn't really understand the concepts of like why that would happen, or understand like why that would make a boy not like me less, or why that would make, cause conflict within the groups in school, or whatever, it is in high school. But it got so bad that they started like spreading comments on social media or telling me that like I was only winning because the judges felt bad for me because I was a girl, or that I had to talk less aggressively, or I had to talk a little differently, or that they were only picking me because of attributes that had nothing to do because of my intelligence. And as a 16 and 15-year-old, that took a really hard toll on me because I didn't really understand why those things were happening. And what I thought was that all these people were my friends. And it got so bad to the point where I was having severe anxiety. I didn't want to go to school. I was like throwing up in the bathroom, and it really, really hurt me because these were the places that I spent pretty much my entire day in. And it got to the point where I talked to my dad about it. And usually I would handle things like this myself. I didn't really talk to my parents about these things, but I told him about it. And he said that I'm really lucky to have a support network to get through this, and that a lot of like girls wouldn't have even stayed in it this long. And he said that I needed to do something about it. And he like told me like, you go take action against it, like research it, do what you got to do, but don't just sit here and cry about it. And at first, I was really, really angry at him. I was like, oh, come on. Like, I just wanted the validation, tell me that my life sucks so we can move on. But he wasn't really
let me be a victim.
Yeah, I know. I was like, please just like, let me move on. I just really wanted him to feel bad for me, and he didn't do that. But turned out working for the best, I guess, for a lot of reasons. But I was mad at him for a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, but then I started doing research and I used my debate skills, and I came across an article that said gender stereotypes develop at the young age of 6. And that's when I realized that those were the reasons that I was feeling that way. And those are the reasons that people in my debate team thought they could treat me like that. And I started doing more research, and I found that there weren't any gender equality organizations that were currently tackling those issues at that young age, but also tackling it in all genders, not just, girls. And I also found that a lot of these organizations costed a lot of money. They weren't accessible to people of all socioeconomic levels. And so it started with that. And I decided, hey, like maybe I start something that can fix those issues. And it started off like super small with just like one girl and one school. And then it grew to what it is today.
That's incredible. The two things I love just on a motivational level, and I know that you do some public speaking, and one of the things I really love is that you didn't let yourself go down that victim route, well, for too long.
Mhm.
And then the other one is that you found the problem and didn't wait for someone else to create a solution to it, knowing that you had been through it, you could help others through it. There was another challenge that came up during this time, though. I know that this started shortly before the pandemic of COVID-19. And so you had to go through all the challenges of having a growing organization in a time where you couldn't meet, in a time where resources were very different. So talk to us a little bit about that, and what other kind of advice that you have for other young entrepreneurs, or really any entrepreneurs who challenges are coming at them, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, so just to kind of like give a little timeline, first of all. So these gender equality programs started off like very small, like as pilot programs, like when I was 16, and it went throughout high school. And then when I took my gap year, after high school is when I decided to take all of that and officially make it a nonprofit, even though it was kind of running like one already. And that's when we launched with the name Dream Equal. And that was the time where like we decided, we wanted to go global. We wanted to reach other states because we had gotten messages from other people because this program had gotten so much publicity. And I was like really excited about that. And I had spent like 9 months just trying to build the foundation of the nonprofit, figuring out how to do things. Like I had no training in this area. I'd never worked with like any other nonprofits. People always looked at me and were like, oh, like you're a kid, like yeah, sure, it's gonna go global. Yeah, let you can think that. But I was like really scared about it. So I spent all this time building this really strong foundation. And we launched in January of 2020. And then the pandemic, as everyone knows, hit in March. And Dream Equal really focuses on the education system. Like that is where all of our programs run. We run in schools, we run in like community centers, which depend on everything being in person and depends on a really good infrastructure in the education system, which we just didn't have when the pandemic hit. And it broke all of us on the team. Like I'd recruited all these young people who had put in hours and hours and hours into this without any pay. And we were just like, we can't use any of the things that we made. But what we really found was what worked was that during the pandemic, people really wanted something to connect to, a bigger thing to connect to, and lots of young people wanted something to do. And so a lot of people started reaching out to us, and out of nowhere, even though like we launched and we were like, okay, like we're not going to get any chapters, the pandemic hit and we got a huge surge of chapters, which we didn't get when we started in January. And we were getting like all these messages about like kids telling us like, hey, like I'm realizing gender equality and COVID actually connect a lot, and I want to do something with that. And we started providing resources and cranking out all these resources that could work in that format as well, and that could work in the online format as well. And so really like what advice I have for like startups, and I have for anyone starting with that doesn't really like know what's going on, is that to build a really strong foundation, and also be really connected to your mission. Because when you're connected to your mission and you show everyone that works with you like what you're actually doing and the importance of it, people will stick with you throughout these challenges, and you will want to stick with it throughout these challenges. Every startup, regardless if it starts in a pandemic or not in a pandemic, is going to face a lot of challenges, and it's going to be extremely difficult. But if you lay a good foundation, you keep your mission at the center of everything, you're going to be able to get through those challenges. But the biggest thing that is important to realize is that just flexibility is the most important thing. And you can't have a very like concrete way of how you want to do things, because that's just not going to work. You're going to start and you're going to realize that 99% of the things that you had set out aren't going to work. And that would have been true regardless if there was a pandemic or not. We started, with thinking that, like all public schools in the entire United States would kind of operate similarly. Definitely not true, right? Definitely not true. And that's what I thought, because I was like, it was so easy to start one in my school compared to this school. But turns out I wanted a really high funded public school versus like a low funded public school, which would not want a program like this, unfortunately. And so we like revamped and we changed how we did our leadership, and we made sure that we had regional leaders so that they would understand the problems in their societies and they would understand the problems in their communities more than I would. And so flexibility, I would just say, is like the biggest advice that I have, is to, make sure that your startup is capable of doing.
I love it. Flexibility is, as a leader, as a speaker, you always have to have that ability to turn on a dime versus waiting and getting bogged down. So well done, John. Well done modeling that for us and talking about it, and well done doing that. What an incredible time that was for everybody. A lot of people took this downturn and fell into that victim mentality of woe is me, and it was woe is everybody. It was an awful time. Yet a lot of people leaned into it, and part of that mentality that you talked about when you were 16, that your dad gave to you, probably kept that mentality, kept you going during the pandemic as well. Now, I've read as well that you have not only the dream equal, the gender equality, really based on your own experiences and life and seeing it around you, but that you've tied that into climate justice. So talk to me about that, because I don't understand the connection between those two.
Yeah, so we normally don't think about climate justice as like an issue that is connected to every other like big issue that we're facing today, from like gun violence to, gender equality to LGBT issues, like all those things. We never think about that. But it's a fact that we actually can't tackle climate justice if we don't tackle racial justice, gender inequality, and socioeconomic inequality, because climate issues actually affect people of marginalized groups a lot more than it affects other people. And it also is a fact that, unfortunately, gender stereotypes play a large role into why people don't want to take action against climate justice, against climate issues. So there's actually studies coming out now that say that the reason that, for example, men don't want to take reusable bags in the grocery stores, or the reason that they don't want to say that they support certain climate agendas, is because they feel like it would hurt their masculinity, because it's a female thing or it's a feminine thing to care about those things, and it's masculine to want to like man up and like think that climate issues are a thing that the patriarchy does, so it's like a good thing. And so even if you support it, you might not actually actively want to do something about it because it hurts your ego. And so there's things coming out about that, but there's also, on a more broader sense, because for example, homeless people face more pollution and they deal with more water issues than people of higher socioeconomic levels. They're also more affected by climate change. And trans people, non-binary people, queer people are more likely to be in the population. So they're more affected by like climate issues. So are like Black and brown people. But also women are 3 times more likely to be displaced by climate issues than any other gender, just because they're the people that especially like in places like Africa and things like that, like they're the people that take care of the water. They're the people that clean everything, and those issues, climate issues, displace them from, and their kids from, their homes. And there's so many countries where girls don't even have access to education, and one of the biggest issues that keep them from having access to education is not stigma or anything. It's that they're in charge of getting clean water for their families, and they have to walk 10 miles every day to do that. And when they're walking 10 miles is when all of their peers are in school. And so there's so many ways that gender equality and climate change connect, and that's why we have to tackle gender inequality to reach climate justice. But that goes for any issue, just like I was talking about race issues or LGBT issues or socioeconomic injustice. But it's really something we have to think about more, which is why I'm really proud that the work that Dream Equal does, we do a lot of work to connect it to other issues as well, so that we can show that if we don't all stand together in all these issues and show our support for all of these issues and work to increase our knowledge about all these types of social justice, we're not going to see a climate just world or a gender equal one.
It was fascinating to me is years ago, I was involved in a lot of water organizations, still do to some point, but we found out that Burkina Faso, one of the poorest countries in the world, just small little country, landlocked in Africa. Well, that country, just like you talked about, it's the women who are walking 5 miles, 10 miles, 3 miles to go get some dirty water and bring it back. And you're right, it's during school. And meanwhile, everybody at school is getting headaches and having a hard time processing because they don't even have enough water. So one of the things that we were able to do in that area and other areas was to increase education for both boys and girls. And by bringing in and drilling wells so that they had water accessible within a mile or less, and they had it right there. And as a result of that, a lot of the girls were able to go to school alongside the boys, and a lot of the families were able to slowly get out of poverty simply by having that education for boys and girls, and for having water for men and women and boys and girls. It's so important, just those small, simple things that we can take for granted that can weigh things down tremendously. So I love that you're bringing that to all these different places. Well, let's switch over to the business place and workplaces. So let's talk about gender stereotypes in workplaces. I know that obviously you're in all these different areas, and you're in the acting realm, you're in Harvard for school, you got your nonprofit going on. You've seen this as a minority within a community. And so you've seen this all over the place, but I know you've also talked to some different businesses and some different groups about gender stereotypes in the workplaces. So talk to us a little bit about that as well, and just approach it for more of a business angle. What happens when a business tackles gender stereotypes?
I think like a lot of businesses just like, first of all, don't just like to advertise, they're like, oh, like we're an open workplace, or we're an inclusive workplace, like we accept everyone, and forget that just saying those things doesn't actually mean that you're implementing policies that make people who would normally not feel welcome in a place that's not inclusive. You're actually, you're preventing them from joining your workplace. And I think like the reason that we don't think about like gender stereotypes in this way and how it can affect businesses is that because we don't actually understand the importance of having all these diverse perspectives included. And because these diverse perspectives aren't included, we're not even able to make gender sensitive policy in the first place. And so it's kind of like, like, how do we make gender sensitive policy if we don't have people that actually understand these issues in the first place? Which is why like I like to go to different businesses, and why Dream Equal is really focused on doing gender sensitivity training for different businesses, different school systems, and all of that. But there's so many different like ways that gender sensitivity can make your workplace better. It can increase productivity. It can it can help you reach a different market. If you, for example, only have a certain type of people like on your board or in your workplace, and you're selling a product that potentially could reach multiple more populations, you're not going to be able to reach those populations in a way that actually reaches them in like a marketing sense, or even in a way that they could use it if you don't have people that actually know what that population needs. But there's so many businesses that like even they might think about it in this way, and they might realize that it might increase their productivity, but they might not know how to increase gender sensitivity. So I'm just going to give a couple examples about how like your business might actually be holding itself back by just simple policies that have not been changed over years that people think are just, the way things are. But for example, in hiring practices, it's really common and like literally everywhere that it says you have to have a certain degree or certain years of experience to be in a certain position. And we don't not normally think about that as being something that would affect or being something that would be related to gender or to race or to any other social issue. But the fact is that it disproportionately affects people of different socioeconomic levels, different races, and of marginalized groups in general. Because what happens is that when you have a company that says you need 15 years of experience to serve on this director position, and you have all these people who weren't typically like, I guess with your education plus 15 years, calculate that back then they didn't have the resources or were encouraged to go into degree programs that would get them through to this position. But what you see is that your business is still serving people of marginalized groups. So how are you going to serve people of marginalized groups if you're not going to get people of marginalized groups in positions of power in your company? And the thing is as automatically, as soon as you put a number of years of experience or a degree on the position, you're automatically taking out people whose perspectives could provide so much more to your business. While they might not have experience in a certain area, they have experience in another area that could completely change the way that your company operates that no one else in your company can provide. And we tend to look at experience as a very narrow-minded way. And so if your company can like look outside those boxes, you're going to be able to get so many more people to join your organization or your business that can help you reach new markets or help you point out problems that you never would have seen before.
Yeah, I love it. It's the same thing that you were doing when you're going into the public schools. You had to find someone who understand that market, that school district, versus assuming that you understood everything being from Indiana. I was just talking to someone yesterday. He's not an engineer, and he runs a team of men and women who are engineers and all kinds of different, it's actually quite diverse, the group he leads. However, he's not an engineer. I said, well, how does that work? He says, it works great because I have a different perspective than they do. They come from just the technical, and then I come from very pragmatic. And he says, I'm able to ask them that questions. And that's what you're illustrating here so well, is that you need the people who have different ideas, different understandings, so that you can actually reach out to the people who you're trying to reach out to.
Exactly.
You don't have the people on your team that you're trying to reach out to, you probably won't be able to reach out to the people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you end up making policies that you think would be helpful, but actually might even hurt the people just because you haven't had their perspectives included.
I love it. Okay, so one last question here. And you did this quite young, 16 years old, to really get going. It wasn't until a little bit later that you actually founded it as a nonprofit. But still, talk to us about your experience as a young minority social entrepreneur. What advice do you have for someone who's listening to this, and you share this, I share this, and you got someone who's on the younger scale of things, like you and I'm right there at 21. I just turned 21. So someone's on the younger scale of things, and they want to create that change in their communities. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I just would like to start off telling a little bit about how I started off literally knowing nothing. And by nothing, I mean, I started off leading gender equality programs without even knowing what the word feminism meant. I thought it was a bad word. I started like these gender equality programs not thinking that it was ever going to be a nonprofit. I don't even think I knew actually what a legal like nonprofit was. I probably couldn't tell you. And so I would just like to emphasize that you really can start from anywhere. And if you have the right mission at hand and you really have something and a goal that is, like for the good of other people, if you have a goal that you really, really believe in, a mission that you really, really believe in, I think that you will have the drive and you will be able to use the resources around you to make whatever you want to make or do whatever you want to do. When I started doing all these programs, I started with one person. I had this like vision of doing it, in the entire like school system, because that's just how my mind is. I was like, I want to do this and I want to do that. But I started off and we only got one girl in our program, and it was devastating. And I was so sad because I had worked months to make that happen. And we picked up and we're like, okay, like what's going wrong? Why do we only have one girl? And turns out the next time we had the program, she brought all of her friends. And it was just like a small marketing issue that people didn't know who we are. And, you are going to encounter all of these challenges, and people are going to tell you that you can't do certain things. But if you're surrounding yourself with the people that tell you that you can't do that, then you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people.
That's
and
good.
they probably don't think they can do it, which is why they don't think you can do it.
Yeah.
And that's an issue for them and not for you. And so you have to power through it. If you believe in your mission, I really think you can make anything you want happen. And I really also like want to emphasize that it doesn't matter if like the work that you do reaches like 500,000 people or it reaches 5 people. Those 5 people will go and impact another 5 people, and those 5 people can go and impact another 5 people's lives. And you can change the world just through that. You really just have to stay true to what it is that you want to do and power through like any hardships and challenge the status quo. Stand up and speak up when someone tells you that you can't do something, because you might help the person that's sitting right next to you. You never know how you're going to impact the world. You never know like what it is that you're doing that could actually make a difference. So don't focus on the numbers. Don't focus on how big something is. Focus on like the actual genuine like joy that you get with doing what it is that you do, and the joy that you get from, promoting this mission that is so important to you.
I think that's a huge, crucial difference between nonprofit and more of a corporate for-profit idea, is that you need to be thinking about not trying to change the world, but trying to change their world.
Mm-hmm.
And by trying to change their world, you sometimes end up changing the world in a massive way. And there's takeaways for corporate world in that as well. I love the heart behind that. Let me just focus on some people. One of the things I do every day as I go about my coaching is I just start out with a simple prayer: help me help people.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes ends up being some free advice. Sometimes it ends up being a podcast. Sometimes it ends up being a conversation, and sometimes it leads to money. But ultimately, my desire, even in a for-profit model, is let me help someone. Help me help someone right now, today. I love that you take that into your speaking, into your work. What are some of the type of audiences that you really like getting in front of and talking to about what you've done, what you're doing, or sharing some of what you've learned?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the audience that I enjoy speaking to the most is just young people who are around my age, people who are starting to get in and like learn about these issues. I love talking to young people just because as a young person, I didn't really get the opportunity to see people like me, like on the stage. Like if I was, going to like a youth conference, there's always someone older that was speaking. And I was like, yeah, okay, but like you're older. So of course, like you can do all of these things. And so like, I think I really love to speak to young people. I also really love to speak to like girls and women. I love to speak to, people of color. But I also just really love to speak to corporations in general, because I think corporations can really use the perspective of someone from Gen Z. And we normally just don't think about how Gen Z is actually like the largest youth generation ever. Corporations need to reach young people, but they don't have people of Gen Z on their boards. They don't have people of Gen Z working for them. People like up to 24 are still probably in college, so they don't have people in leadership positions working for them, which is why I love to talk to corporations, because I really believe that they need the perspective of, young people.
One of the things I thought was really cool, I was probably about 22 at the time, and I had someone who was about 50 who came in and invited me out for dinner. And he said, talk to me and just tell me what's going on. Tell me how you are seeing your now out of college professional life. What are you seeing? What trends? What do you think your generation's bringing in? And I think what he did in that moment is now something that other people need to do with Gen Z. And there's always that move up. And sometimes we forget that there's another generation under the other generation. So I'd highly encourage, and I'll put your information in there and your speaker contact as well, so that people can reach out to you, because I think you'd be a great person. You got the education, you got the background, you got the experience, and you have all kinds of awareness. Whether they decide to do anything about it or not, at least they're aware of something that you could bring to their plate. Well, thank you so much, Ina. I really appreciate it. I love always talking to you. And I love just your perspective, your take, your incredible drive to not only get something done, but to help people in the process.
Thank you, Mike. I really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Absolutely. And as you go back to school this fall, we wish you the best of luck. I'm sure that will be airing right at the time that you're back in school, so you can see it and share it around at that point in time. So thank you to all of our listeners for being a part of the podcast for the Speaker Spotlight. Take a moment to share, to like, to follow, to subscribe, and make sure that anybody that you think could be influenced and hear Ina's message gets this so that they can take part. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.